Okay. Just want to introduce Rob and Cooper from Cisco. These guys are super studs when it comes to two-factor authentication. They're going to be here to discuss why two-factor authentication is not just essential, but not bulletproof. And here's why, and the importance of why two-factor authentication is so critical for any network moving forward and part of the big SASE solution. So I'm going to hand it off to you guys. Take it away.
Appreciate that, John. Thanks everyone for joining. The goal for today with this call is we want everyone to walk away with a greater awareness of some of the tactics different attackers and bad actors are using right now to bypass MFA. Where MFA was a great start a few years ago, people are starting to catch on, and more of the cyber attacks that we're seeing now are sophisticated attacks people are using to get around it. It's not just people going after your data centers or anything else anymore. They're specifically targeting and going after users because, as we know, end user communication or end user education on cybersecurity best practices is still one of the toughest things to do. Make sure everyone's on the same page and aware of what some of the threats out there are. So by the end of this webinar, you'll get awareness of what some of these common MFA bypass techniques are and some steps that you guys can take in your own environments to protect yourselves from them. So over the last couple of years, I'm sure all of you have seen headlines almost weekly with different big organizations being taken down by attackers, and many of them have had MFA already deployed in their network in one way or the other. What we're seeing now is it's no longer enough, and they're either compromising a third-party entity that is accessing your network and going after them with something like push fatigue, or they're going after your employees, or sophisticated phishing attacks that way. So what are some of these MFA attacks? Well, we're looking at things like MFA interception, where attackers are intercepting the one-time passcodes that are generated by your authenticator app or a token that you guys are using. Or device registration, where an attacker is able to get access through MFA and then they enroll their own device, and now they can access your applications at will once they're enrolled and they're using MFA on that user's credentials. Push bombing, this is the one we see the most common, where an attacker is just going to continually spam your employees or someone else, hoping that eventually they're just going to approve it. Sometimes the employee thinks it's just because their VPN's reconnecting, or they're just not sure what's doing it, so they just push approve. And that is a really big problem. And then one of the more recent ones is web session cookie theft, where attackers are stealing valid session cookies and then hijacking the session from there. So what this might look like with an application that most people use is the Cozy Bear attack that happened last year, where an attacker was able to get a list of credentials from a company's office mailboxes, and what they use is they use those credentials to connect to Office 365. They then push phish the employees who they're trying to gain access to. One of them let them in. From there, the attacker is able to self-enroll their own device and set up MFA. Now, whenever they're looking to gain access to the application, they can just do their own MFA and bypass having to do the push bombing. From there, because many employees like to reuse their credentials, username and password, it's not too hard to take those same credentials and put it into a client like VPN and log in that way. And because they've already registered their own device for MFA, well, now they can access the VPN and access whatever's behind that firewall. Or depending upon which application they gain access to, let's say Office 365, they're now able to start an internal spear phishing campaign and start going after other employees and sending them malicious links, trying to get malware into your network. So some of the ways this can be avoided is using strong MFA authentication, where tokens and things like that are not used, and we're using stronger forms like security keys or push authentication or number matching, or having the ability to block unwanted devices from accessing your applications, setting up device enrollment policies so a user is not able to enroll themselves past a certain point and you guys control that. or detecting when a login is a little bit risky and outside of what that user normally does. Let's say someone's signing in from California and that's their normal means of accessing an application, but now all of a sudden they're coming in from Europe or Virginia. Well, that's a little risky. We want to elevate that. We want to make sure that that attack is stopped and there's a little extra friction between the attacker trying to get in and their ability to do so. Let's look at a few ways to prevent some of these attacks right here. Share my screen one more time. I'm sure a lot of you guys are familiar with number matching. It's something that's becoming more popular now, especially when the numbers that pop up are on the screen that you're interacting with. Unless you have the device and you're also logging in, you shouldn't be able to match these numbers. So when your users are logging in or an attacker is logging in and their credentials pass through and they're approved, this is what should pop up on their screen. Unless the attacker also has access to the authentication device, which in this case, if you guys have set up enrollment policies where a device enrollment is secured, they should be able to enroll their own device. And access is not going to be able to be granted because the attacker who's trying to gain access to the application can't input the code. They're blocked because of that. Now, where this comes in with risk-based authentication, because not all users want to interact with this way, they don't want to do number matching every time, is where elements like risk-based authentication come into place, where we're detecting those risky logins, where someone is accessing something from a different location than they normally do, or they're trying to access from a device that's not recognized or is new, or the session trust has been broken and now something else is happening. Well, risk-based authentication picks up on that. And when a suspicious login is attempted, it should pick up on that and elevate the prompts. So now instead of being able to approve or deny the push request, the user is going to have to do number matching to gain access to your applications. Another way to go about this is to just restrict devices right off the bat from being able to authenticate into your network. This could be used through all sorts of policies that you guys might put in place in accordance with your application. So when someone's trying to log into an application that's coming from a device that isn't recognized or is outside of what you might consider a compliant device, when they're logging in, we don't even want them to get the chance to authenticate. We just want to block that out the gate. We don't want them to try and do a push bombing attack. We want to catch that up front and ensure that they're not able to gain access to these applications. One of the last ways too is ensuring that the devices that are accessing these applications aren't introducing any risky variables into the network by making sure that they meet minimum compliance standards when they're accessing these applications. So this could mean when the device is logging in, we're checking to make sure that there's a firewall enabled on the machine, or the operating system is up to date, or there's a system password on it, or it's encrypted. Some of these attacks are some of the 0 days that you guys have seen in the last few months where a browser 0 day was exploited or an operating system 0 day was exploited, and attackers were able to gain access to networks and applications because they're able to exploit this flaw. Ensuring that your policies are set up front to catch this as soon as possible helps reduce the risk of this happening and your network being compromised. And then one of the easiest ones to roll out is just ensuring that you guys are using really, really strong authentication methods. Texts, emails, phone calls are all things that can be intercepted if an attacker really puts their mind to it. Using secure methods like security keys, push authentications, or using elements that might revolve around password lists where you have to have the machine there and it's registered to you. I'll make it a little bit more difficult for an attacker to get in and try and bypass that. So, and then controlling the options that your users have to log into instead of giving them the options also helps you guys control some of those elements as well and make sure that when they're logging in, it meets your standards. All right. Rob, I'm going to pass it to you now.
Cool. Did you want me to share, or are you going to pull up the screen again?
I'm pulling it back up.
Okay, cool. Nice to meet everybody. So we're going to talk a little bit more on this zero trust term that keeps making its way into the market. Cooper, if you want to jump to the next slide here. So Cooper went through a variety of ways that attackers can bypass two-factor authentication. So I'm going to try to break down what zero trust means is as simple way as possible. Because everybody's definition may vary just a little bit. But at the end of the day, when you hear the term zero trust, what we're assuming is that there's bad actors that are both within your network and outside of your network. And so nobody should be trusted by default anymore. So we need to verify every step of the way anytime somebody tries to gain access to your resources on your network or your corporate resources, in the cloud. So if we start breaking down like zero trust, there's really kind of 3 buckets that I would split this up into. Number 1 is give users only as much access as they need. So an example being a programmer whose main function is to maybe update lines of code. They probably don't need access to your financial records. And vice versa. Somebody in accounting probably doesn't need access to, legacy systems that the web developers are working on. So only give your users as much access as they need. Number 2, we want to ensure that every device that's trying to log in is authorized and does not pose risk. So let's assume that maybe your organization's based in the United States. That's where everybody works. You guys issue out company laptops, whether those are Windows devices or Mac devices, to all your employees that you want them to use. Now, let's say an unknown mobile device tries to log into an application from another country. Number 1, how do you guys even know about that? And then number 2, what are you guys doing to block access from that attempt? If your sole measure is relying on your user to deny that request, that's not a great strategy. If we look at that first slide that Cooper pulled up with all the different headlines, that's how a lot of these companies are getting socially engineered and breached, is their end users are in a rush. They're getting annoyed by these push requests, so they're accidentally approving things that they shouldn't approve. So we want to make sure every device that logs in, we know and we trust before we allow access. And then lastly, the main piece, right, is enabling two-factor authentication across your organization. So again, that's taking something that you know, which is your username and password, and then coupling that with like a phone, a token, a security key, or something that you physically are, like a biometric or facial recognition. So it's the same concept if you were to go to an airport, right? They ask for your ID, they ask for your ticket before they let you on the plane. So if I were to summarize this again, guys, like all it takes is a bad actor to be right one time and they can take down your entire network. So zero trust is removing that reliance of trust from your end users. So you're no longer saying, hey, I hope my users make the right decision every time. You're now applying policy and risk detection capabilities to mitigate that. Go ahead to the next slide, Coop. So Cooper called out 4 different, MFA or two-factor authentication attacks that are going on. At the end of the day, these bad actors, they're going after your end users. They're no longer going after the network. They're no longer going after your data center. They're getting a list of compromised credentials, whether that's through a phishing campaign or whether they just go on the dark web and purchase those. They're using those credentials to log in. If you guys have two-factor authentication in place, great. That's a nice start. But we want to make sure that your users aren't accidentally approving things that they shouldn't approve. And that's where applying some of these additional controls is going to mitigate that. And you can just see on the right here, so leveraging more secure methods. Not all MFA or two-factor authentication is the same. Using things like security keys, biometrics, push authentication with risk detection. Those are going to be way more secure than relying on things like one-time passcodes, SMS, phone calls, your forms of authentication. So really try to move away from those as much as possible. And then using risk detection capabilities so you know everything and everyone that's trying to access your resources so you can put the correct controls in place to restrict risky authentications and risky devices. You can go to the next one for me, Coop. So we meet with a lot of customers, Cooper and I, across all industries. You can see here just a few, right? Whether you are in the healthcare industry, financial industry, you work with, federal government agencies. The theme across the board in today's age is everybody needs to have some sort of two-factor authentication in their environment. That's like a bare minimum in today's age. So whether you're trying to meet PCI, HIPAA, NIST, GDPR, EPCS, the new FTC safeguards rule, right? All of these compliance requirements are asking organizations to have things like MFA in place. You can also see on the right, things like HIPAA compliance, ISO are now starting to require companies to have visibility into every device, especially those unmanaged devices that they don't really have a way to get information about. We can come in and help customers with that and give you that granular information that you need to meet these compliance requirements. And then we can jump to the next one here. So I'm going to go through a couple scenarios. These are pretty common themes that come up in our discussions with customers. And we just kind of want to let you know, again, like this is all stuff that's in the wheelhouse of what Duo and Cisco can help you guys achieve. So in scenario one, let's assume I gain the username and password of one of your employees and I attempt to log into your network. Am I successful? Well, no, the answer is not with two-factor authentication. You can go ahead and click there, Coop. And then go to the next slide. So scenario number two, let's say I am an employee of your organization, but my laptop is running an outdated operating system with known vulnerabilities. Am I able to access corporate resources? And for this one, nope, not with device insights and posture checking. So again, we can apply policies to say if a device is running an outdated operating system, we can require that user to update it before we give access, or we can just simply deny access. You guys can create those policies based on what you want that workflow to look like. Scenario number three, Coop. So let's assume I'm a hacker with an employee's credentials at your organization. I'm trying to socially engineer one of your end users into approving one of those two-factor authentication push requests. What's preventing me from gaining access? And so for this is using what's called risk-based authentication for any sort of suspicious logins. So some cool things that we can do, right, are if we detect that a user is now logging in from a new location, or they're logging in from a new device, or maybe their device is trying to log in is in a different location from their mobile device that's receiving that authentication request. There's a variety of risk detection features that we can look for. And in those scenarios, we're no longer just going to allow approve or deny. We're going to move that user into a more secure method of authentication to make sure it's really them. And then for the last scenario here, our company's policy, and this one I think Cooper and I probably run into the most, and customers don't have a good way to address this, but our company's policy is to restrict access from personal and unmanaged devices. The only way that they can do this is if they have those users enroll their personal phones in something like their mobile device management solution. So how do we enforce this policy when it comes to bring your own device when users maybe don't want to enroll their personal devices? So what we can do is we can turn on something that's called a trusted endpoints policy, where we can differentiate your company managed devices from people's personal devices. And then if an authentication occurs from a device that's not known to you guys, you can just simply deny access. So this really is going to mitigate a lot of those attack scenarios that Cooper described before, because if somebody tries to log in from a device that's not managed by you guys, you just block that authentication attempt in its tracks. And so I think just to wrap it up here, really, I mean, the goal of this call was not to be around all of Duo's products and features. It was to show you guys, hey, there's a lot of ways attackers can get around two-factor authentication. We want you guys to take this information back and think about your current security strategy. But really, why do customers choose Duo? I encourage you guys, go look at some of our customer stories, go on the Reddit forums. You guys will see from other customers that use Duo the reasons why. Here's a list that we've compiled. But at the end of the day, customers love us because we're easy to use for both end users and IT administrators. We can be deployed very quickly. We integrate well with pretty much anything that has a username and password, so we're vendor agnostic. You don't have to be a Cisco shop for Duo to work in your environment. So I think that's a huge value add that we can offer all customers. And then really we were built from the ground up as a security company, not an identity company. So everything we do is focused on securing your corporate applications and resources in Crown Jewel. So go look online if you don't believe what I'm saying here. Everybody likes Duo because it is very simple to use and deploy. So I know we wanted to leave a few minutes left. This wasn't going to be a super long webinar. So if you guys have questions, we'd love to answer some of those. Otherwise, John, if you guys saw anything that came through, feel free to fire those away. I think it might be muted, John, if you're talking.
Yeah, sorry about that. Thank you, Cooper and Rob, for giving us such a great presentation. And it is important to understand that, MFA obviously is important, and I think most people here understand that, but it's the right type of MFA, the right settings enabled, the right way to do zero trust. So thank you for pointing out all the ways that even more ways how we can now we have to secure the network. Appreciate that very much. So I know that there's probably some questions, and before we do get to those questions, I just want to invite everyone to learn more. So if anything here sparked your interest, or you want to learn more, you have some technical stuff that you want to know, please, if you want to see a more in-depth demo, look at the back of the dashboard, anything like that. Even if you want a free trial, we can set you up with that. No credit card, nothing. We don't want anything from you except just information to get it provisioned. Please let us know. Reply back to myself or contact Hummingbird Networks and let us know. We'll give you a tailored security discussion just for your organization. So a few questions popped up, and I'll go over them real quick. We just have a few minutes left. What would you guys say the most common applications that customers use Duo for?
Cooper, I think you want to take that one?
Yeah, I'll take that one. It can honestly vary based on the customer's needs, but the most common ones we see are securing access to the firewall, email, workstation logins, protecting servers, but it can range to things like homegrown apps or payroll or really anything. A lot of that stuff is driven by compliance requirements, depending upon where critical information sits. Also, sometimes by cyber insurance requirements where specific data is need to be secured. But those are the most common ones we see, and they're all very quick to set up.
Yeah, Cooper, I was recently talking with a customer, and they actually applied for cyber insurance. And this is, by the way, on every cyber insurance application now. Do you have two-factor authentication? That used to be the question. But before 3 years ago, there wasn't even the question. Now, 2 years ago, the question was, do you have, two-factor? Now the question is, what are you actually protecting with two-factor? And they're very, very specific. So specific that we actually, on a separate note, we had a customer that gave us their application for cyber insurance. They got approved and what have you, and they got back with the cyber insurance application. The insurance company actually tried to, they tried to get into the network, and they showed the penetration that they tried to get in. They also looked at their email, said, told them about DMARC and a whole bunch of new things that they need to look at. So it wasn't just like signing a piece of paper, yeah, I want cyber insurance. The insurance companies are actually trying to hack you to see if you're protected in advance of them giving you the policy. That is something new. We just saw that like last week. So I don't know if anybody else has seen that. Raise your hand if you've seen that. Second question, how long does it take to deploy Duo?
It can really just depend on the use case and the infrastructure you guys have in place, but most of these can be done in less than 10 minutes. For instance, one of the most common ones we see is RDP, and that's something that can be set up in 5 to 10 minutes and then deployed really quickly. Some might take a little bit longer, but we worked with organizations to get tens of thousands of people set up and enrolled and hundreds of applications rolled out in a matter of weeks to make sure that they're fully secured in a timely manner.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so it's super easy. AI, ChatGPT, everybody's favorite new program, whether you admit it or not, it is, right? So bad act, what would you say, like, how is AI playing a role with cybersecurity in the whole? We see a lot of customers. We have a lot of customers. We hear about a lot of different things. You guys hear probably just as much, if not more, than we do. How is AI playing a role within cybersecurity?
I would love to take this one. So yeah, it actually plays a role on both sides of the spectrum. So not only for bad actors to use AI to breach organizations, but security companies are implementing tools with AI as well to mitigate those. So just an example, right? Like they have tools to ChatGPT, like you mentioned. They can use that to craft really nice and fancy emails. They can personalize those emails with people's, information. So now phishing is getting a lot easier, right? So we, on the other hand, can use AI to build that into our risk detection capabilities and monitoring capabilities. And then when we detect something's out of the norm, we can step up those verification to say, hey, we're not just going to allow a prove or deny here for this one login because you're logging in from a new country or new device. We're going to make it sure it's really you, and you have to enter in a 6-digit code this one time so that we know it's actually you. So we're building in a lot of these risk detection capabilities using AI to prevent against things like that. And then another thing I just like to put out there, like we've talked about phishing quite a bit here. So Cisco does have other, security solutions in addition to Duo, obviously. So one of the ones that complements us really well is something that's called Cisco Umbrella. And that's really for preventing your users to going to bad places. So with Cisco Umbrella, it does DNS security. So if your user clicked on a malicious link that maybe came in via email, Cisco Umbrella can stop that user from going to that website. So that way they're not even going to get compromised, give away their username and password. So there's a lot of things that we can do both from like an AI perspective to prevent against it. But yes, attackers are also leveraging that to breach organizations as well.
Yeah, Rob, that was on the application as well. Do you use any kind of DNS protection? And they were very, very specific in what they were looking for. So they're not messing around anymore, these cyber insurance companies. There's a lot of things on those applications that are very, very important. Read the fine print on all those applications. A lot of them will give you a policy, but when you go to make a claim, you have to have reasonable security, they call it, or reasonable ways to stop bad actors. And what does that mean? Nobody knows what that means, but you have to have logs, you have to have a SIEM, you have two-factor, you have to have DNS protection, you have to have malware protection. There's all these things in the whole SASE, world that is very, very important. So if anybody's going through that, please let us know because we could potentially help you kind of navigate through the security app, the cybersecurity insurance applications. We can help you there. So thank you very much for attending. There is going to be one lucky winner receiving some licenses for Cisco Duo. I will notify you guys on that in about a week. Again, I just want to say thanks. My name's John from Hummingbird Networks. We're a Cisco certified partner for over 18 years, and we can help you with anything to help you solve your security challenges. Thank you so much for attending. You guys have a fantastic day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for joining.